Cologne, Germany, 2nd of January. Snow had fallen, covering everything in a delicate white blanket. Tourists gathered in squares around each side of the cathedral, taking countless photographs of a sight they found awe-inspiring, the design unlike anything most of them had ever seen, the spires climbing toward the sky seemingly endless. Heidi Fisher appreciated the cathedral for its beauty, but having lived in Cologne her entire life, the novelty of the Gothic structure had worn off before she had reached the age of 10. To her, it was a place of worship, no different to any other church. And while she hated to be cynical, seeing the grandeur of the cathedral, with its origins dating back more than 800 years, surrounded by hideous modern buildings, was too much for her to bear. Humans had to ruin everything, striving to be better than previous generations, but failing miserably most of the time. Standing in one of the squares watching the tourists rush around like Christmas had come again only 8 days after the annual celebration, Heidi turned and a shiver went down her spine, not from the cold, but from the sight of the train station. She could never remember how many tracks crossed over the Rhine on the bridge, passing within a few metres of the cathedral, but she hated the fact that the true purpose of the building had been forgotten by most, becoming little more than a tourist attraction that brought in visitors from all over the world. The walk across the river usually helped clear her head after a tough day, but as she walked away from the crowds of foreigners, dodging the snowballs thrown by children who had yet to return to school, Heidi felt a strange chill. She pulled up the zip on her light brown parka as high as it would go, without trapping her scarf, and slid the sleeves over her hands, even though they were already covered by a pair of thick black gloves. The hat she wore to cover her ears and to stop her blonde hair thrashing in the occasional yet strong wind also did nothing to combat the chill. It was as if the atmosphere and the density of the air had changed. Quickening her pace, Heidi took a look up at the sky to see that it was completely white. There would be more snow in the next few hours. She hurried across the bridge, hoping to be home as soon as possible so she could run a hot bath and take away the discomfort she felt as the chill enveloped her. The fur-rimmed Wellington boots that had been an impulse purchase 2 months earlier had proven to be one of the best items she had ever bought, making her feel safe as she walked home from work. On the first day after the snow had fallen, she had worn her usual boots on a visit to a friend, and had almost killed herself taking a fall on a patch of ice hidden beneath the fresh snow. Darkness would fall soon. She had helped to open up the shop at 8 a.m., her manager having convinced her that it was a wise business decision to open up on the 2nd of January, because most other people would still be off work with money to spend, so it was a rare opportunity to entice more customers into the store. Heidi agreed, if only because her manager had promised that she could leave by 3 p.m, meaning Heidi could walk home while it was still daylight. When the sun went down, the lights on the bridge in the cathedral were switched on, another thing Heidi hated, because she thought it made the area look like a giant disco rather than the site of a historical beauty. Stopping briefly on the bridge, Heidi managed to glance over the side to see that the water of the Rhine was actually beginning to freeze. It was going to be a cold night. Resuming her pace, she left the bridge and almost skidded around the corner towards her apartment complex. The air still didn't feel right. Maybe it was nature's way of telling her that the weather was about to take a turn for the worst, but there was also a sensation that she just couldn't shake. It was as though someone was watching her. Reaching the door to her apartment complex, Heidi pulled out the key card she needed to get into the building. A gust of wind knocked her sideways, forcing her to steady herself against the door. Did she hear a whisper, or was it just the wind howling around the building? She was starting to feel nervous. Glancing behind her to see if there was someone else waiting to enter the building, Heidi was both shocked and relieved to see that there was no one anywhere on the street. She relaxed and turned around, swiping the card through the sensor. 3 beeps later, the door swung open on its electric mechanism, making a soft humming noise. Heidi slipped the keycard back into her pocket and pushed the door, opening it further. Out of the corner of her eye, Heidi saw something red rush past her head. Before she could turn to see what it was, the red had settled in front of her nose, a cloth covered in something that had an overpowering stench. She was no medical expert, but Heidi had watched enough television to assume that it was chloroform. She struggled against the cloth and the hand that held it to her face, trying to push them both away, but another hand took hold of her head, applying vice-like pressure. Her vision was beginning to blur as her eyes struggled to stay open. They were failing. Her brain was shutting down. With her final conscious thoughts, she prayed for salvation.